I am going to put forth a bold claim that as of the current state of the industry, it's actually a lot easier to succeed as a solo indie developer than it is of a team of 2 or more people. Now, I am not just pulling this crazy notion out of thin air, which it might seem like. This opinion actually came from an offhanded comment made by indie veteran Rami Ismail of Vlambeer on one of his Call Me Ishmael live streams, where he said something along the lines of it actually being easier to work as a solo developer as opposed to having a team. And as a solo developer myself, I was fairly hesitant to accept that at face value, as much as I would have liked to believe it. I did a bit of thinking about it, and I've come to the conclusion that actually Rami was probably 100% correct about that. And I think there are a few big reasons for why this is true, so let's start with the simplest. It's pretty much always cheaper in terms of business expense to work as one person than as a team. Whether that involves purchasing a real-life office to facilitate everybody, or whether it involves paying for remote work software, server hosting costs, or hell, even the time spent making sure everybody's on the same page, solo development dodges 95% of these unforeseen costs. I mean, you still need to pay rent and electricity, you still need to afford a computer, and depending on the terms of your engine, you might need to still pay licensing. However, these costs are multiplied by every person on your team, especially if their main source of income is salary from a company you built on business loans. This can be mitigated somewhat by doing a rev share thing, but a lot of people want the stability that comes with a proper salary and won't accept rev share, and that's with really good reason. Once 30% of that gross profits goes to the game retailer, 5% goes to engine for licensing, about 20% goes to tax, and the remaining 50% of whatever's left goes to one other person, you personally are left with 22.5% of gross profits. And that's in the best case scenario, where you have no unforeseen costs from things like accidents, and you're only working with one other person. Now, even if you would only get about maybe 45% of gross profits using the above math from working on your own, that's an increase by a factor of 2, which can easily mean the difference between being able to pay rent this month or not, especially in the current state of the games industry where profit margins are razor thin at the best of times and non-existent or negative at the worst. But what about the fact that having more people allows you to put more man-hours into the same piece of work, thereby increasing the quality and overall sellability of the game? Well, that's not wrong, and it's a pretty relevant factor. I mean, chances are, in almost all cases, a game made by a small team is going to sell more in terms of sheer copies by a game made by one person. However, the issue is the quantity of man-hours that teamwork tends to lend itself to. Now, companies of groups of developers tend to go for larger-scale projects which take a lot more time to produce. Now, there are some exceptions like Nitrome who frequently create new games, but at this point they're basically a mobile company, which naturally means that pretty much every game they create has a pretty harsh upper limit for how large it can be. Now, if you're a 3-person team working on a game which sells 10,000 copies and it takes a full year to produce, you're actually worse off than a solo developer who spends 3 months on a game which only sells 500 copies. Plus, if you do release a complete flop that only sells like 5 copies, that's going to hurt you a hell of a lot less if that game only took you 3 months to make and is going to only take you 3 months to try again. If you now have to burn through a full 2 years of savings until your next attempt to not kill your company, that's going to hurt and more likely is not even going to be possible. Lastly, I would say that you can still get other people to help you as a solo developer, whether it's like a friend who wants to contribute a few songs for fun, or whether it's a freelancer who you're willing to pay a lump sum to draw a sprite for you. You can decide exactly how much help you need and how much you're willing or able to pay for. Now, this is something that's much more difficult in a company setting, since it's fairly difficult on an emotional level to fire someone if you can't pay for them anymore or if they're not pulling their weight. The point is that solo doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it all by yourself. You can still make friends and work with people, but you have a lot more control over a lot of factors which can seriously aid your chances to make it. Maybe I'm just talking nonsense because I've never actually been in a team, but I have seen a lot of people talk about this, and I got this idea from somebody who's, made a big name for themselves in a team, and honestly, this is my opinion until somebody comes up with a good reason why I'm actually just dumb. Solo development is better, prove me wrong. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more videos about random elements of game development that I'm actually really not qualified to talk about. Goodbye.